Donald Trump is currently dismantling USAID, and liberal imperialists are freaking out. The United States Agency for International Development is not an aid organization. It's an organization the United States uses to implement regime change and project soft power throughout the world. Samantha Power, the head of USAID under Joe Biden, even wrote a book on how you use aid and liberal social issues as a front to implement regime change. USAID spent their time brainwashing locals with US propaganda, then paying them a no-show salary so they can protest 24/7 with the goal of destabilizing the government on behalf of the US empire. USAID even set up fake aid clinics as a front as they organized the local populace and prepared them for regime change. USAID is a truly morally repugnant organization that no one should be sad to see go. And Democrats are throwing a fit and launching mass protests in order to protect USAID. And in the process of defending USAID, Democrats have been saying the quiet part out loud on how it's not actually an aid organization, but an organization used to counter China.
USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world.
You go die. That's the message from the United States government. It is the wrong message to be sending, and it opens up the door for China and other people.
Big winners are China. The big winners are Russia. The big winners are Al-Qaeda. The big winners are ISIS.
We even have quote-unquote progressive anti-war Democrats like Ilhan Omar giving impassioned speeches defending the honor of USAID. The Democratic Party is completely cooked, man. Even though Democrats are melting down, it's important to note that Donald Trump is not getting rid of the function of USAID altogether. Donald Trump is simply merging USAID into the State Department with Marco Rubio as head, so they will have even less transparency and accountability. This is simply the US empire reorganizing itself as they panic over the rise of China and the decline of their own influence. What's poppin'? My friends, my family, we are back. Welcome to RBN Live. We have, and I explained this concept many times before, why it's, in terms of resistance, it's better when Republicans win, because at least you have the liberal Democrats will at least pretend to give a fuck, and they would help you raise awareness for an issue, being a useful idiot for us, simply because they hate Republicans. Right now, and it's a great time to be a post-duopolist, as always, because Democrats are in shambles, and all the people who was like MAGA influencers who wedged their bets on the Donald Trump team, they wanted to grow their audience by propping up Donald Trump. I promise you, question me now, quote me later, all these people are going to look really dumb in the next 2 years. Because we're going to cover the Netanyahu-Trump press conference. But this is why I think Democrats, at least when the Republican in charge, they will pretend about stuff. Like, you have Democrats right now that is protesting USAID in mass. Like, this is Democrats. I see all these calls for mass protests.
Real life.
Here's Democrats. Meanwhile, these people is nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found during the genocide of genocide Joe Biden. These same people are now tweeting like crazy in the light of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's press conference, which was just as batshit as insane as you can possibly imagine it being. It was very embarrassing for the Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, the MAGA influencers who pretend that Donald Trump is not part of this Zionist regime, that they didn't enable the Zionist regime. So as this is going on, as Donald Trump is saying that he wanted the United States to control Gaza, the liberal timeline is on fire talking about that. They say, oh my God, this is crazy. This is ethnic cleansing. You've never ever seen Democrats ever use that term under Joe Biden when Joe Biden was the person who leveled Gaza. Look, this is I actually don't know that much about Owen Jones. I think he's more like I actually don't know that much about him. But this is him responding to this clip of Trump. He said, this is a very basic journalistic test. Donald Trump has declared Gaza's population must permanently be resettled. Any journalist, any media outlet which refuses to call this ethnic cleansing is a total disgrace. When have you guys ever seen Democrat-leaning media? And to be fair, I don't know Owen Jones. I gotta be careful. But I seen the liberal timeline. I never seen the use of ethnic cleansing and genocide like I'm seeing right now. What's disgusting is among liberal media, among even the progressives, they will still use the 40,000 number regarding the amount of dead people in Gaza. The casualties in Gaza, they'll say 40,000, which is genocide denial, which I believed liberals and progressives did to protect Joe Biden. They did that in many genocides before, in Rwanda as well, where they will freeze the number. They'll freeze the death count to make it seem like the genocider is not as guilty or they are improving somewhat. But Donald Trump, during this press conference, which was very incredible, and I'm spoiling too much because I'm going to cover the press conference here soon. But during the press conference, Donald Trump mentioned how there's 1.6, 1.5 million Gazans. He keeps saying it. So it's like Donald Trump keeps accidentally leaking the real death count in Gaza. You guys understand? So there was around 2.5 million people in Gaza before October 7th. Now Donald Trump and these untrained, like they're not good as blinking, guys. Like the Trump team, they're not as good as Lloyd Austin. They're not good at deflecting the real number. So they will outright say, like, oh yeah, there's 1.5 million Gazans. And then liberal imperialists, the Bidens, they're like, the fuck, you're not supposed to say that? Joe Biden is rolling in his grave, or his soon-to-be grave. Joe Biden is extremely frustrated watching Donald Trump accidentally leak the real and true death count. But what does it say that liberals, including progressives, repeated said death count over and over again? So under Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they slaughtered, and this is according to Donald Trump, who have information that we don't have, who slaughtered 800 to 900,000, which is, it seems way more accurate than the bullshit numbers they were telling us. You know what I mean? I told you guys before that I thought it was more like 300,000 months ago. So Donald Trump is leaking the real numbers, showing how many people that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris killed during their administration. And progressives wasn't protesting that. Ilhan Omar wanted you to vote for that. Ilhan Omar was an enthusiastic Biden supporter. The same with Ro Khanna. But now they have a problem with dictatorship in the policies they see in Gaza when Donald Trump is in office. And now these same Democrats who was quiet when the butcher of Gaza was in power, they are now bringing upon themselves to fight and be in the streets on behalf of USAID. I've seen Democrats in the streets on behalf of the FBI. They have a new DNC chair, who is literally a Zionist who advocated for censorship on college campuses on behalf of Israel, who said that saying for the river to the sea is genocidal. So the Democratic Party plan to resist Donald Trump is to strongly defend institutions, imperialism, Zionism, and attack Donald Trump from his right. USAID is a cancerous organization. And here is Ilhan Omar. As I explained in my hotspot video, you guys know that USAID set up fake AIDS clinics in Africa that was a front used to support anti-government action and protest, where they gave people, as I explained in my video, I didn't have a lot of time, they gave people full-time salaries just to destabilize the government, acting as a AIDS clinic. And there is a lot of people in Africa who don't trust standard westernized AIDS medication in clinics, and they don't trust vaccines. You want to know why? Let me see. God damn, I need to find this article. I should have saved it. I read it this morning. I'm gonna see if I can find it. How they was explaining how a lot of people in Africa don't trust vaccines and they don't trust aid clinics because it was used by the West to destabilize their government and fund terrorist groups. So now they're like, Africans are like, no, we don't trust none of that shit. Which is like a consequence of USAID's horrific actions. But despite this is the organization that Ilhan Omar wants to defend.
We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made. I am exceptionally upset about USAID. I lived in a refugee camp for 4 years as a child surviving civil war. It is the essential programs that USAID provided that kept my family and I fed and safe.
This is the progressive wing defending USAID. And this is what USAID will openly admit their real intention. Samantha Power, the lead of USAID, wrote a book on how they set up fake aid in medical clinics, how they use aid in liberal social justice issues as a weapon to destabilize governments. And USAID helped strum up the civil war and unrest in Somalia. Ilhan Omar should be furious at USAID. Do you guys understand why Ilhan Omar is hated among her community? Why Somalians view her as a traitor? She is propping up an organization that destabilized her own country. This is the anti-Trump resistance coming from the progressive wing. Meanwhile, Ro Khanna and others are confused on why I'm done. I would never support the modern U.S. leftist progressive. They're unhinged neocons. They all have anti-China derangement syndrome, anti-Russia derangement syndrome. They hate countries that provide their own citizens health care. Meanwhile, and I can show you guys receipts on USAID all day, but I want to get to the Trump Netanyahu press conference as well. This is a 2014 propaganda video from USAID explaining how they're working in Kosovo to ensure the end of socialism and for the country to apply market-based capitalist ideology. Here it is.
Easing Kosovo's transition from a socialist society to a market-based economy remains a core priority. Since the end of the conflict, USAID has helped privatize 90% of former socially owned enterprises.
So USAID is working to fight against socialism. It's a class war institution, an anti-communist institution that is helping the capitalist class fight a global class war. And they hilariously named their organization USAID, so people would think that the organization is about aid, which is why I explained in my video, USAID is the United States Agency for International Development. And they want you to think it's about aid, but that's not even what the fucking name is. United States Agency for International Development. Meanwhile, Ilhan Omar, progressives, Bernie, and the entirety of the dumb left, they pretend USAID is a fucking aid organization. They don't even pretend that's what it is. Do you guys know that USAID spend more on governance than they do on aid? I saw a crazy chart. They spend way more on what they call governance than actual aid. They pay people full salaries. And then they write down for their state, for the official record, that they are aid workers. I'm working at this aid clinic, but they're actually being paid full time to start civil unrest. Now, isn't that hilarious? Because that's another example of what everything that the capitalists and the Zionist institutions accuse us of doing, I'm talking about the true anti-imperialist left, is pure projection. Because Donald Trump is going after college campuses, going after students. He's siding with Democrat Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. Remember, the quote-unquote opposition. Because what they say that the reason why there's so many anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protests is because they must be funded. Oh my God, who are funding these crazy Antifa radicals? It must be Iran. It must be Hezbollah. Oh my God, we must investigate the students to make sure they're not being secretly funded by Hezbollah. Do you guys remember that? We must see if this Chinese Communist Party is not funding anti-genocide protests in the United States, because why would anyone be against their taxpayer money being against genocide? No one would do that unless you have an evil state like China funding them. Oh, it must be the Russians. The Russians are funding you. The Russians funding that person. The Russians funding them. The Russians funding Gray Zone. The Russians funding everybody. You guys see how it's all projection. Let's play the clip again. Here's the real function of USAID: to wage a class war against the working class and implement capitalism worldwide.
Easing Kosovo's transition from a socialist society to a market-based economy remains a core priority. Since the end of the conflict, USAID has helped privatize 90% of former socially owned enterprises.
They don't even hide. They say it's our number one priority, not aid, not none of the shit that Ilhan Omar pretends they fucking do. It's their number one priority.
Easing Kosovo's transition from a socialist society to a market-based economy remains a core priority.
A core priority? Meanwhile, Democrats are in the streets, my friends, to show you how absolutely cooked and far gone the Democratic Party is. They're in the streets protesting the fall of this corrupt organization. Unbelievable. But with that said, there are a few people I see that are getting this issue wrong. And not out of they're not trying to trick people. I can understand why they view it this way, as you say being dismantled, but that's not what happened. We are seeing the empire correct itself. We are seeing the empire go through a panic over the rise of China and Russia. After realizing their Ukraine proxy war was a failure, their plan was to weaken the global influence of Russia and China, and they did the exact opposite. The Biden regime was horrible for the empire. So now Donald Trump and the current ruling class is trying to figure out how they can undo the damage and adjust after the mistakes that the Biden has made. So now they're trimming the fat off of what they view as useless tools of the empire. So USAID, and this shows the hilarious difference between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans realize that USAID is a liability because of segments like this, because they leave a paper trail. I've been discussing the corruption at USAID. Many anti-imperialist journalists we had on our show exposed the corruption at USAID because they have to report their spending to Congress. Let me repeat. They have to report their spending to Congress, which shows all of the corrupt shit that they do. So what MAGA and Trump want, they want to absorb USAID and continue the activities of said institution under the dark umbrella of the State Department, so there is less transparency and accountability. Let me repeat that, I kind of botched it. You must understand that Donald Trump and Marco Rubio want USAID to continue. They are just throwing it under the giant umbrella of the State Department, so there are less transparency and accountability. And here's Marco Rubio openly admitting this. As liberal corporate media are freaking out, on Fox News, they're like, hey guys, don't worry, man. We got this. The CIA was running USAID. USAID was a friend of the CIA. We're not even going to pretend there's any fucking... We're not even going to pretend we're doing aid no more. We're just straight doing the info warfare shit now.
Entity, and that their master is the globe and not the United States. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not sustainable.
Can it be reformed, or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort where their basic attitude is, we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. They're a global entity, and that they're...
So that's the truth. Now I want to get to the next story, Donald Trump and Netanyahu. Already kind of hinted at it. It's a huge story. If anyone wants to understand what really happened between the meeting and what the vibes was like, this video is Netanyahu in a nutshell. This is Christian Zionism in a nutshell. Pathetic cuckery behavior in service of the Zionist state. So you had, I think this is funny. I think this showed the subservient mindset. And I truly believe, I've been thinking about this. I truly believe that Christian Zionists, they don't want sovereignty. I think there's so many Americans, and this goes back to Donald Trump, like lamenting the fact that Israel is not the censorious power that it used to be. Remember when Donald Trump was like, man, I can't believe so many people speak out against Israel nowadays. Back in the day, people was terrified to speak out against Israel. So I think there's a part of Christian Zionists that they don't really want true sovereignty. They like the idea of having Zionist overlords. They like the idea of having these Jewish masters that also play a big role of keeping anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist movements down. Am I overreaching with this point? I want to know what you guys think. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, it's out in the open. I think they enjoy having the master. You know what I mean? It's like the freedom of not thinking. Having too much freedom, having too much sovereignty is scary. So I think a lot of white Americans, they're just okay with having Christian Zionist masters that can tell them what they can or cannot say. Remember that clip I showed you guys of CM Punk? He was at some MMA event where he said, we need to end the genocide of the Palestinians. And he has two white commentators started nervously laughing. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. They enjoy having shit they can't say, I guess. Like, how can you explain the level of subservience that white America had for Donald Trump. This is, for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party. The Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu takes way more heat in Israel than they do from white American MAGA. And you can find Israeli newspapers that openly explain how there's a genocide in Gaza. You know what I mean? It's something that openly said. They openly bring up the barbarity of the IDF. Like, believe it or not, when you read some Israeli media. Meanwhile, they have a convicted war criminal, and they were doing these events. Look, this is the U.S. Military Honor Guard. This is why I don't think veterans are shit either. Because imagine being a veteran and doing this shit simply because you want free education. You're doing a fucking dance. You fucking lending credibility to Benjamin Netanyahu for what? Free college? I don't buy this. That's treasonous behavior. How is that not treasonous behavior? Well, we have military saluting and honoring a genocidal war criminal. And then people are like, oh no, it's okay because they want free college, so yeah, they're gonna betray us all. This is one of the highlights. I'll go to the hotspot page because they have a lot of clips on the press conference showing the cuckery of Donald Trump with Netanyahu. But this is the big headline that has everyone freaking out. And we already knew this was coming. This is the empire. The empire doesn't really change between presidents. And Donald Trump, a man who married his daughter off to the Zionists to show his loyalty. Like, Kamala Harris had an AIPAC handler husband. And now Kamala Harris is so pissed at her AIPAC handler husband that she threw him under the bus because he's the reason why she lost. So she had an AIPAC handler husband. Trump married his daughter off to a Zionist to show his loyalty. That's how much in the bed Donald Trump is. And we have a great guest join us. John Payne will be joining us very soon. I see you in the back. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. Look forward to hearing your perspectives. I'm going to introduce you very soon. Actually, let's bring John in. We have an amazing geopolitical analyst and a peace advocate and friend of RBN. This second time we had you on. It was great having you on last time. Thank you for joining us on Revolutionary Blackout, John Payne. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
How you doing, man? It's great to have you
glad
back
to
on.
be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, sorry I'm late.
No, it's okay. No worries. People who watch
pleasure.
our channel know I'm quite the ranter, so I had many things on my mind, so it gave me some time to cover that. But I want to hear your perspective because Trump and Netanyahu had this meeting today. I'm also very interested because you do a lot of great work, and I follow your content regarding China as well. One of my many sources I get on this. I'm interested in hearing your response to China declaring their tariffs against Trump, the new trade war. I would love to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to get your thoughts on I don't know if you saw the Netanyahu-Trump press conference. It just happened, so if you missed it, that's okay. But it's very predictable, everything that happened, where Trump essentially went to Netanyahu, and he called for U.S. ownership of Gaza, which shows how the duopoly work, where you have the Democrats who lull people to sleep, and they commit the genocide. Then the Republicans come and they do the cleanup. But John, I already talked a little bit about that. I would love to hear your perspective about what you expect about coming from the incoming Trump regime on Gaza, and any reactions if you have some. I know the press conference just happened, but do you have any reactions regarding Trump calling for U.S. Ownership of Gaza?
Oh, this is just part of the crazy clown car thing that we have now for the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Just one crazy move after another. It's all I see is the headline here, but I mean, it's as if it was real estate, just like Greenland, right?
Yeah.
And his son-in-law is involved in property in Gaza.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is just outrageous. take
It's
over,
funny because people
relocating
in
all
Denmark,
Palestinians. Final solution,
yep,
a final solution for Gaza.
yeah, man, it's funny
I mean,
because
it is shocking, but it's not. On the other hand, it's not as if there were many indications that we were coming to this point.
yeah, this is why it's very unfortunate that we have two parties that both controlled by the Zionist regime. It's funny you mentioned Denmark because I saw an article how people in Denmark is absolutely panicking over the
Yep,
United
they
States
are.
against them. And there was polls that showed that Denmark viewed China and North Korea as enemies. So as people in Denmark was viewing the enemies of the United States as threat to them for some reason, here come the United States to show them who's really the biggest threat towards world peace. And Iran, Saudi Arabia, they're not happy about this as well. There's massive red alarms, and this just happened. I didn't change my whole show when I saw Trump say this. I'm just getting reactions about this. And now Trump essentially promised Netanyahu, I have a lot of clips from Hotspot we can watch. He essentially promised Netanyahu, and we will never know what happened in the private conversation, but it's very clear what happened. He promised Netanyahu that he would crack down on free speech on behalf of Israel with a combating anti-Semitism bill. And now he's promising the war with Iran, which is going to happen. Here, I want to get your reaction to this. Trump reinstates maximum pressure campaign against Iran. So we know exactly what Donald Trump promised Benjamin Netanyahu. He promised Israel that he will allow young Americans to die in a war against Iran on their behalf. John, you have any reactions?
Yeah. Do you think he actually, I still tend to think he doesn't actually want a war with Iran, while giving Israel as much as he can. But I
hope you're right.
You know, it does seem that you know, before this, of course, it's clear Netanyahu wants that war with Iran that he's been hankering after for decades. But this could still be Trump trying to sort of back off from a full-on war, which he can't afford, given all his other agendas. So meanwhile, as he's doing this, back home, he has this really tumultuous agenda of so-called taking over, of dismantling the administrative state, the deep state. You can't go about doing all that and the tariffs. I mean, somewhere in there, they have to realize they can't be, you know, going on all fronts like this. So there is some really wild bargaining behavior and wild statements out there, but this one is really very, very concerning. This talk of taking over Gaza, whatever that means. It's basically about depopulating the place. I mean, the agenda that, you know, it seems he's really on board with, or that he's pushing, is to move the entire population out of there and clear it.
Yeah, certainly people have to understand that the people of Gaza would never allow it to happen, because the Palestinian resistance, they took a lot of losses.
Of course.
I think Israel took a giant L during this conflict as well, but the Palestinian resistance did as well. But their biggest win is the fact that they will retain their land and still have a pathway to a state. Giving up Gaza will completely erase that. It will make every single sacrifice worthless. And that's why I'm gonna find a clip. I'm sorry, I kind of disorganized.
You can see now why he had AIPAC support. He had the you know, he had the support of these Jewish billionaires coming into the elections, right? This must have been in the cards for a while, but it reflects the very hawkish, very the ultra Zionist statements from his team, not least from people like RFK Jr.
Yeah, he
right.
in this speech, I have a few clips that we can show. In this speech, he explained how, like, why would any Palestinians want to stay in Gaza in the first place? And this shows the fundamental misunderstanding of the imperialists. They want to stay because it's their land. That's the last victory they have. They won't lose.
This is something very difficult. It's very difficult for Americans to understand. Yeah. I'm sorry, but this is this is difficult for settler colonial to understand. That kind of attachment to the land. It's more than identity; it's the being of people. And all this while, we've had this very typical, this characteristic lie about the Palestinians, that they are, without identity. They're Arabs from somewhere else. They are interchangeable. That kind of thing. I'm sure you've covered all this. I'm no expert on the the issue. I'm just reacting to it,
Yeah.
and I wanted to look at it in the context of, when I came on, this bombshell hadn't dropped this morning as I was trying to get on this. But just looking at the first few days and where the foreign policy might be going. So as you recall, it started with these threats, or these about getting Greenland and Canada, basically about taking over or annexing Greenland and Canada. And they sound crazy, but it does look like he's serious about Greenland. And meanwhile, that moved to the discussion about the Panama Canal. So then for a while, it seemed as if, in geopolitical terms, a kind of retrenchment from liberal empire, that global ideological project, to good old American imperialism in the Western Hemisphere, the sort of manifest destiny stuff.
Well said.
And in a way, that is a retrenchment, a more realistic position, no less kind of brutal in its way, but one which you might seem more realistic given U.S. resources, U.S. capabilities, and it's the very deep problems of the country. So I think there's that sense in the team, in the administration, and it's certainly reflected in Marco Rubio's statement so far. Very early in, he made the extraordinary for us who've not heard anything like this from a U.S. official ever. I think that we're in a multipolar world, which is just reality. I think that's a descriptive statement. You're already in the multipolar world. And subsequently, when he talked about de-dollarization and BRICS, if you recall, I think just yesterday or the day before, he said, look, we can't just sanction people. The time for sanctioning people is limited because they're just going to trade in their own currency. So that's the reality, right? The sanctions regime against Russia hasn't worked. The trade restrictions on China have spectacularly not worked, sort of backfired. So they're in that sort of situation, and you might hope in a very realistic way for some kind of space, as these guys retrench a bit. Exactly that. Yeah.
I think this is the clip you referenced. I'm going to play the clip and I'm going to pass it right back to you, John. I'm going to play the clip. I want you to continue your thoughts.
Today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them today.
So, John, I would love to hear you continue to comment.
I like the term secondary economy. This is the one we don't control. This is the one we're not involved with. It's some sort of black market, right? It's like the way they call these ships that ship Russian oil that are not insured in London, and so they're called Russia's shadow fleet. But these are simply ships that are not insured in London, so that they can continue to transport sort of Russian oil. These are third countries that have nothing to do with the Western sanctions. But anyway, I wanted to sort of, there was a bit tongue in cheek, but Rubio does look more switched on, a heck of a lot more switched on than Blinken.
Yeah,
There's a kind of realism there. And I was looking at it in diplomatic terms. This is a guy that the Chinese would be able to talk to, I think. That you could have a sane conversation with, even if he had crazy beliefs. You know, we're talking about really low standards here. Okay. Because
I know what you mean.
My standards on this, right? When I post some of these things, people are saying, "Oh, don't you know these guys are?" Yes, but look where we've come from. A absolutely Joe Biden's genocidal administration is both genocidal and suicidal in the way it was actually right up to January 20th, the handover. They were trying to provoke basically a kind of conflict that would have gone nuclear with Russia. If you recall, the long-range missiles into Russia and so on. So absolutely nuts. That was probably one of the most, perhaps the most dangerous administration in our lifetimes, and for a very long time in U.S. history. Simply because it was out of control. There was really like no one at home.
You guys realize the only reason we're not in the nuclear war is because of the patience of Russia, Iran, and China.
Exactly.
Like the Biden, to your point, I'll let you continue.
Yeah.
But to your point, Biden pushed the red line over and over
again.
But go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I was just going to say that. That you have statesmen like Putin and Xi on the other side, that we're not in a nuclear war right now. Now, so in comes Trump, and it's extremely disruptive, and people have been trying to look at some sort of rhyme or reason in this, and maybe he's doing all this crazy stuff in order to come to a sort of more realistic posture about this thing called the liberal empire, these 800 bases around the world, that there might be some degree of retrenchment. No one is expecting the US empire to suddenly turn a new leaf, but some degree of pragmatism, and then more realist in technical sort of in IR terms, a more realist foreign policy. That is one that sees, that looks at the other side's calculations as equivalent to our own, or as a mirror of our own. That there is a kind of almost a notion that you are an actor, one great power among others, instead of this lunatic doctrinaire thing of basically the liberal empire, where there's just these good guys, and then there's Satan on the other side, right? And that is just absolutely dangerous. This is aside from ideology, aside from whether you agree or not with their ideology. You want some degree of sanity on the other side. Now along comes Trump, and he's extremely disruptive, and in some ways quite entertaining to see the USAID taken apart, I have to say. One has to celebrate that. Really, I had no idea that thing was bigger than CIA.
Dude, I learned their budget is crazy. Liberals are like, they don't even 1% of the budget. 1%, that's a lot of money.
1% of the budget is a huge amount. So it turns out to be like this slush fund, right? Come money laundering operation. There's a huge sort of can of worms there, or you just, and these are things that the public and the world can't unsee after seeing it. So in that sense, Trump is interesting, and there's a kind of accelerationist pleasure in seeing the guy dismantle the US empire, that notion of US empire. But then the flip side of that is we're going to see some really ugly stuff in a very transactional way, straight out of, and one would, outside of the doctrine of liberalism, you just have this kind of brutal behavior, like looking at Gaza as some sort of patch of real estate. That's the trade-off, right? And it's a different kind of danger. Sorry. Yeah.
I apologize.
But I think from a Chinese perspective, he would seem easier to deal with because he's looking for a deal. It would seem that this guy, he's trying to strike a deal. And from the Chinese and the Russian perspective, okay, Putin knows he wants out of Ukraine. He wants the matter settled. Unfortunately, there's no way he can settle it because the Russians hold all the cards now. They basically have victory, and there's very little that the US has to bargain with. So I think this is going to stir up stuff like this in Palestine, for example, and almost create leverage through chaos.
Yeah, do you guys see now
Yeah.
why? And I believed him when he said it. Why Vladimir Putin said he prefers Joe Biden over Donald Trump? Because he said he prefers Biden over Donald Trump because Biden is more predictable.
Yeah, Biden is just
Trump one day will talk about peace, then the other day
genocidal
will talk about
maniac.
tariff you. But go ahead, John. We'll hear your thoughts. Go
Yeah.
ahead, John.
No, funny. I mean, what a position we're in, right? Between this predictable genocidal maniac who's not really there anyway, right? And this sort of chaotic flailing. So I think Emmanuel Todd, the French intellectual and scholar, said something really useful in this regard, because I think observers, I think you and I and all of us watching this have actually had to be quite, I mean, we're stunned at the degree of irrationality. I mean, this is just looking at it pragmatically. These people don't even seem to be batting for their own side, right?
Yeah.
So you want to see, okay, how each player calculates the benefits and costs, etc. How they evaluate what sort of picture they have of the international situation and what they might be doing. So you want to understand their rationality. You want to understand how they're acting for their own interest. But you have behavior that's just self-sabotaging, for example, that's incoherent. You say you want to focus on China, and then you start another war in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
So they're just flailing around. And Emmanuel Todd said, he wrote a book about this, but gave a very good interview recently in a podcast in which he said, at this stage, we're watching the stage of defeat of the United States. It's already defeated in Ukraine.
Yep.
You're watching the behavior of a defeated beast, basically. Don't expect rationality. This irrationality is precisely, this flailing around is precisely what you're going to expect. So there's nothing to be overly sophisticated about. I see all kinds of, people have all kinds of theories because we like to find patterns. We like to find some sort of, rhyme to the, reason to the rhyme, right? But there's not.
Yeah, the liberal, your breakdown was amazing because I've been thinking about this a lot as well. The liberal wing of the empire is in disagreement with the, for lack of a better term, the neocon conservative wing of the neocon party. So, for example, the Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, they will say DEI is weakening the empire. Meanwhile, the liberals will say, no, we need DEI. DEI is our propaganda tool in order to help recruit black and brown people to fight. So it's a different direction for the empire. The liberals, go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, exactly. I love this dialogue with you. This conversation we're having, because they're almost like both of them are equally kind of aggressive, right? They're not the friends of the people in the global south. But I think the Trump side, the MAGA side, is at least driven by a populist base. It at least represents, or was elected to represent, a group that is pretty strident, pretty tough about what they want. You saw that in the H-1B debate, right? Where it's basically people on the MAGA side, people you think are on the right, that were upholding a classic left labor type of position. We don't want our wages driven down by this. And you didn't see people on the left really saying much about this, okay? About the H-1B issue, for example. And now with Musk dismantling USAID, for example, you had Carrie Lake, going on about, hey, did they really did USAID actually cause a coup in Maidan? You know, you're a bit late to this, but hey, great, do you realize? No, they're bringing up all this stuff that we've been talking about, right? About subversion, and then what's going on about the biowarfare program and about COVID. This is stuff that you didn't expect to hear.
Yeah, and that's the empire infighting that we're talking about, because
This is
the
empire
liberal wing,
infighting.
yeah, the liberal wing support
Right.
that stuff. John, please continue. But the liberal wing support that stuff, while the conservative wing of the empire, like, no, why the fuck are we funding biolabs for? Why are we fighting Russia and Ukraine? So this is
why are we fighting Russia, Ukraine? That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
They have this infighting going on in the empire because this is the empire tearing itself apart. This is the empire falling apart, and they see themselves losing to their competitor, China and Russia. So now they're trying to figure out why, which leads to this infighting, which is why it's very amusing to us when we see it happen.
It's very amusing to see it. It's amusing in its way to see this infighting. But I had hoped, I can still hope that the MAGA administration, the Trump administration, might prioritize their domestic agenda, that's the overriding thing, that they're sorting out this other stuff so that they can focus on the domestic reform, in their view, right? This is the great battle. This is the one that puts them in jail if they lose, quite frankly. And puts their opponent, this is the one where the stakes are rather real. There is a real kind of knife fight back home, and that they need to focus on this, because it's no small thing to take apart organizations like USAID, the NED is next, and perhaps even the CIA. As they do that, a lot of dirty laundry is being sort of put out there, and they don't seem to care. So that's interesting, and we shouldn't discount the value of that. If you have a kind of anti-imperialist position, you shouldn't discount the progress being made, so to speak, by history, by these contradictions showing up. Because in the end, I think the base driving MAGA does want to have some kind of better life, for ordinary Americans.
Majority of Americans, I believe.
Yeah.
The majority of Americans want that, and at least Donald Trump is smart enough to pretend he gives a fuck about that.
Exactly. These guys don't give a fuck. If they could get away with it, they would. But they have a base that I think is pretty aggressive about what they want. They're going to be cheated.
Take on the whole this thing, because Donald Trump is someone, in my opinion, who obviously not ideologically driven. Like, he used to support abortion 10 years ago, for example. He's not like a hardcore neocon. He is just a businessman that is advancing his own agenda. He don't really care about the status of Israel, God. He's not like a hardcore ideologue, but he's willing to go along with whatever ideology can give him power. So he's willing to give messaging and pretend that he's willing to support peace initiatives because that helps his brand, that helps him along. While people like John Bolton, they are appalled whenever like Donald Trump will say something pro-peace, because it's not really about an ideology that Trump is serving. It's about serving himself. Meanwhile, at the same time, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I am concerned because the overwhelming pressure that he's getting from the right wing to counter China. And because once again, he's all about his brand, he's all about appeasing people. And I can see him going along, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're right on this. I can see him going along. Like, for example, I see like JD Vance and all the MAGA people blaming China for our drug problems. Like the same way they blame Mexico for our drug problem, even though they have nothing to do with our demand, guys, by the way. It's very pathetic that Americans blame China for the drug problem. But I see like the Gordon Changs having a ton of influence. I see them on right-wing media. I see Ben Shapiro. I see all these people in Trump ear. And that's the whole thing about Greenland, was countering China. They want to do all these things to attack China. And this is what I'm concerned about regarding the neocon right. Like the liberal wing of the empire was all about starting nuclear war. They were doing think pieces. How can we survive a nuclear war? So yeah, they're scary. Don't get me wrong, they're very scary. But I want to hear your thoughts on this, like the Trump and your thoughts on the tariff war they fighting in China, because one of the reasons why they putting tariffs on China is because they blaming them for fentanyl. And that's how they get a lot of white Americans to hate China. It's not our problem. It's China. That's our drug problem. So do you have any thoughts? Once again, this is very thought-provoking conversation.
I'm pretty sure the fentanyl stuff, I'm pretty sure that is there for the bargaining, right? That is there in order to kind of rile people up and put the pressure on China. They really, if they cared one bit about the fentanyl issue, about back home, they would actually look at the demand issue, look at what's happening back home, right? Yep. I mean, China, where all this stuff is supposed to be coming on, doesn't have a drug problem, right? Doesn't have people sort of dying in the streets of fentanyl overdose. No, I think is Mexico in that situation. These are sort of supposed to be your sources of this stuff, right? No, the tariffs are part of that's his big idea. That's his, and Scott Bessent is behind this. And the idea is to shift from taxes to tariffs, as if tariffs weren't another sort of tax. I think the tariffs give him leverage over other countries, though, because in his mind, tariffs are taxes on other people. So it gives him another bit of leverage over China, and he can go there and talk tough and talk big, because once you tariff some other country, you've got their attention. Okay, while you're taxing your own guys directly through income tax, nobody cares. But so it's shifting from this to that, and it's their way of trying to solve a really almost insoluble structural issue here, which is U.S. finances, the fiscal situation. It's just completely bonkers, right? Right now, it's crazy that you have this debt completely out of control. So I think it's their attempt to get at that. It's probably misguided, but they're trying something. Now, back to trying to understand Trump and the Trump regime and so on. It's transactional, but what does the guy want? I think he has an instinct. He does have an instinct to avoid war. This is not to say that he won't get into it. He won't bungle the thing and get into it, but an instinct to avoid war. He wants to look like the peacemaker. He wants to be the Nobel Peace Prize type guy, right? He wants to be the peacemaker. And I think he and Musk, they really do have a thing for getting at the deep state. That one is also personal, of course. That's also personal. So beyond just the transactional stuff, beyond selling crypto, for example, and and just grifting, there is that. What's truly dangerous, some of the truly dangerous signs are what they're trying to do, the Zionist sort of influence, and the other one is the tech bro, a kind of right-wing tech bro Palantir type influence, where they're trying to take AI. So this idea of shifting from old-fashioned influence operations to let's just doing it through global dominance of AI. That's truly dystopian shit. That's we're going to have this Stargate thing, and we're going to dominate the world with it. And there's a beautiful moment in which this Chinese company, DeepSeek, as everyone knows, just came in and popped that gigantic bubble with something exactly opposite of that. Open source. Now every country in the world can just use it, can apply it and use it. You could a $6,000 rig at home, you could run your own AI, or even smaller, you could run DeepSeek. Right. So it is available for everyone now. It's absolutely free. It's accessible. You can look under the hood at the code and work with it. In fact, it looks like OpenAI has also adopted some of its code. Meta is doing it. So, it's the opposite view. I mean, these are two different futures. One, your kind of Terminator, kind of Skynet future that these guys are literally planning. And the other one is one in which this technology that everybody is saying, so many of these Davos types are saying, well, this is the great threat, AI, this is the great danger facing the world. Yeah, no doubt. But they're saying that in order precisely to militarize it for themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, we've already seen OpenAI and Palantir work together. Where is that? In Gaza.
Absolutely. Perfectly stated.
Mass assassination.
The CEO of OpenAI even said that we have to rewrite the social contract in order to support AI. Like, he said we had to completely re-envision the relationship between government and the people. And I'm like, bro, how are you saying that in public without fear for your safety? Like that is something that's insane to say.
Pop, right? Yeah, he's an absolute Zio nut. I mean, yeah, you have people like that wanting to take over. So you're taking power out of USAID. Where's that power going to go?
Yep.
So a lot of crazy stuff like this is going to happen. This kind of movement of, power centers. One of the things that people have observed is quite clear in the Trump administration, the coming to power of the Trump administration is this West Coast, East Coast, West Coast thing. It's from Wall Street to the tech bros, right? To the Jonathan Sachs, Elon Musk, types, right? Peter Thiel. And these are libertarian-like people, libertarians who have made a kind of little bargain with MAGA.
Yeah.
And where their interests coincide, but where on certain things like labor, on H-1Bs from India, they could, come apart. Vivek is in a casualty of that.
Yeah. The rise of the giant tech machine we're seeing now is both. I think it shocks both the average right-wing conservative worker and especially the liberal. And I'll explain what I mean when I say this. When the tech bros first started out, and I will let you hear what you guys think about this, because I've been thinking about this for a while. When Elon Musk started out and when the tech bros started out, they started out as liberal but somewhat apolitical because they viewed that as the best for their business. They viewed that the best for their business to present themselves as socially liberal climate activists. That's what Elon Musk did. But at the same time, they're like, all right, we don't want to get involved in politics. Hey, guys, we're apolitical, but we're very liberal. They didn't do that because they really believe that. They do that because they believe that's best for business, the best way to attract customers. Then once they gain a certain amount of wealth and influence, they especially after getting pressure from the Biden regime and the liberal regime to push censorship, they saw the government getting in control of their work. Then they realized the best way to move now is to shift hard to the right and use hard power, which they resisted earlier. You know how they originally didn't want to be part of politics. They went from that say, "Oh no, we all in on endorsing Trump. We all in on being on MAGA." That's why when you see Elon get on join MAGA. That's when you seen Zuckerberg join MAGA, even though he banned Trump before, because it's like instead of doing this thing where we're particularly apolitical, we're gonna completely join and
Zuck is now MAGA, right? Kind of,
He's a fucking martial artist now. He's just
he's a Dana White on his board. He's he's ingratiated himself with the Trump team. You're right.
That's a capitalist. They're
basically really hard libertarians. Some of them sort of post-human, transhuman, kind of libertarian. So it's an alliance of convenience. Actually, J.D. Vance is an interesting figure in this regard. He comes out of the Peter Thiel ecosystem, right? Worked for him.
His entire career is on to Peter Thiel, but go ahead.
But he's not one of these. He has a sort of more worked out ideological and different type of ideological position. And this is the other thing. Okay, so now we're seeing a kind of we're in the middle of this tumult, right? As you see the collapse of a kind of liberal order. but it's also an ideological collapse. That's why it's such an interesting time in the United States right now, but also a very dangerous time. I think one positive thing to take from this is really the collapse of liberalism as an ideology. That's not observed enough. People haven't been talking about that enough. Yeah. They don't look at the thing as ideology. So you see this kind of liberal empire thing taking a setback. I don't think it's just a setback. I think ideologically, its hold on people is broken. And so you have all these, different types coming out now, include conservatives, right, of different forms. I mean, how would you call Elon Musk a conservative? He's not, but there's a sort of alliance among them. So it's a very interesting time. And the good thing is that, I mean, the really big phenomenon here, the big picture thing is the ideology that underwrote global order for the last 35, 40 years is gone.
Yeah.
So that order will go. They're not going to reconstitute this system in quite the same way. It'll come out different.
Yeah, and that's the fall of the United States global order. Defines every single move that the empire is making right now. It defines why over half of Americans view China as the enemy, because we were being hit with nonstop anti-China propaganda, because we're in a new age of multipolarity where the United States have to configure the influence of China, which is why people was laughing at Donald Trump floating the idea of putting tariffs on the EU, because that would just lead an opening to China. And that's why you're seeing a panic among Democrats.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
The scary thing for the Europeans are really up the creek right now without a paddle.
That's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
They're up shit creek without a paddle, because they isolated themselves from China. They made an enemy of China, basically, in strategic terms. And now they're getting, threat of, Denmark being chomped up, right? And the US. So if you don't no longer see the world, if Washington is no longer interested in this sort of grand liberal alliance and will take whatever allies or arrangements it can on a case-by-case transactional basis, as Tom Cotton said the other day, we don't care if they're democratic or whatever. This is a fallen world, right? Whoever serves our interests, they could be dictators. So if you come right out and say it, that's the end of the illusion that these vassal states had that they were part of something bigger. Yep. So Europe is screwed. They don't have their energy. They have their energy economy is the economy based on cheap energy. Whatever industry was based on that, and a lot of it is based on that, on a particular price of energy coming from Russia. That's broken.
Yeah,
for the very long term. Yeah,
Europe broke itself following the influence of the United States, and they believe waging war is the way out of it.
Yeah, they let themselves. Well, there was this bargain in which they sort of demilitarized to some extent. They let the U.S. handle the military, the defense of Europe. And in return, they could pretend to be this sort of, values-driven, this community of values, this new type of thing, right? That the EU is driven by values, and the US gets to be the big bad boy. Well, that creates resentment on the US side, actually, among the MAGA types. Why are we defending these guys, right? They have their lifespan is, they live better than us. They have holidays. They have healthcare.
Yeah.
Their life expectancy is 5 years longer than the US. And we're the guys going out there. So it's that compact is, I think, broken. And Trump doesn't want it. So you are seeing world order now completely being remade.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting times to see. I still believe that Israel is paying the ultimate price of the genocide.
Yeah.
Their markets are in complete shambles. Settler colonialists have fled Israel. There's
Yeah.
zero tourism coming to Israel.
Yeah.
So to your point, we're seeing the world order being remade. I'm not saying that Israel's not going to disappear overnight. They're not going to happen.
No.
I'll tell you.
You know,
Go
the
ahead, John.
terrible thing is Trump is sacrificing the Palestinians for this.
Yeah.
To get what he wants, he's going to sacrifice them. We're going to see greater sort of order and some sort of peace might come out of it, but whether or not it does, I mean, if it does, it will be because he literally sacrificed them.
Yeah.
For this. Yeah.
Yeah.
The dynamics are much more brutal and primitive now. Okay.
Yeah.
And we need to learn how to observe this this stuff. This is not the same as the Biden administration or the uniparty style of the last 30, 40 years. There's something new here, possibly more dangerous. But for those of us with an interest, like myself, in seeing the end of empire, this is a very interesting time.
Yeah, it's such a clear, and this is what I mentioned earlier in my earlier monologue. It's such a clear example of us seeing the empire obviously change strategy in real time. The Trump administration seeing the damage that the Biden regime has done, and so they are shifting their strategy for good and for the bad, and the very bad, especially with the recent comments on Trump. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see. We definitely got to talk about this again. It's a very thought-provoking conversation. It's great having you on, John. I'm going to just read a few super chats here. Any final thoughts you have on the topic? Any final thoughts you have before we begin to wrap up, John? Anything you want to shout out?
I think we just to recap, that we are in this time of a kind of dislocation now in leadership. It's hard to see. The outcomes are going to be really unpredictable, and but there's also stuff to be hopeful about, and that is that I think the risk of war with Russia and China diminishing. It's sad to, and I just realized this, I think, to see Gaza used as a sort of sacrificial animal for that. I think what the US is struggling with now, I mean, there's a recognition and a growing recognition in the Trump base about the costs of empire. As you know, empire always hollows out the metropole in the end, right? The people back in the center are also the victims of it. And they're fighting the contradiction involved in that. Yeah.
I have a few super chats. Big shout out to Chris for the $5. Headline on Bloomberg News: if USAID gets shut down, an open door for China. Gee, maybe I want China to be the big trade partner or gas ally. I've seen there's so many of these hilarious headlines where the liberals are openly admitting what USAID is for, and they are. And once again, this is the liberal wing of the empire disagreeing with the wing of the conservatives, because the conservatives say we shouldn't have USAID, we should just merge into the State Department. Liberals say no, USAID makes it look good compared to China and Russia. It's a form of soft power. And MAGA's like, no, fuck that soft power. That's some pussy shit. We don't care about that. That's essentially the dialogue. That's how I interpret it, guys. That's how my mind reads the agreement.
It's a great time for you, man, and it's a great time to be having these discussions.
Yeah,
because it's extremely educational.
Yeah, we definitely got
all the masks are off, the pretense is off. We designed COVID. We made that in a lab. Okay, we put that all over. We built biolabs in Ukraine. Look, the rest of the world is listening to this, and you have these ally types and polite allies of and US friendly types around the world who have censored themselves and taught themselves never to go near that stuff, never to talk like that.
Yeah.
And then you have Washington doing this, right? So it's, learning to speak about it is going to be part of the challenge.
Yeah, it's very. I'm a nerd at the end of the day, so it's very interesting to watch all this go down.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think for $2, Brent, Door's still pretending Trump fighting the deep state. You guys know Door's my homie. I always give Jimmy big props because he one of the guys who propped up our mutual aid when everyone ignores us. You know what I mean? There were a lot of people who, and you guys know who they are. Think about everyone who never mentioned RBN, for example. There are a lot of people who ignored us while we was doing fundraisers, drives, and Door supported Rome's library. He was always there to support our John Mutual Aid, so big shout out for him for that. Well, I would implore for Jimmy, and I'm saying this as a friend.
I agree. Trump is fighting the deep state. He's just doing a lot of other stuff that might pull in the other direction.
See,
right?
y'all see, that's a very commonly shared opinion. This is why I don't understand why people have Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. I don't know why people pretend I'm Jimmy Dore's manager. Because I had him. I have a lot of people on show. Are you guys asking me about
Jimmy Dore
that
on?
John Payne had? Like I had. Look at my guest list just this last month. I have so many people on. I go on so many people's show, but I have Jimmy on once last year, and then everyone asked me about his fucking opinions. I'm not his fucking manager. For one, I'm not his manager. Secondly, the only thing I would say to Jimmy, my friend, is I hope he realized that joining millionaires on the right to promote the culture wars that is used to divide the working class is not being class conscious, my friend.
Yeah.
Please, I really want my friend Jimmy to realize that. Join the right to promote their culture wars, the culture wars of the millionaire class. That's not being class conscious, my brother. But with that said, Jimmy's not the enemy. He didn't vote for Trump. He thinks Trump is fighting the deep state like John does. He's not a Trump supporter. You know what I mean? So why would I focus on him? Why would I focus on one of the few people who actually support our mutual aid when there's a mountain of people who ignored us? No one's perfect, and we don't agree with him on everything. So why do people want me to? You guys are programmed by very successful channels, I will admit, like the Vanguard. They're killing it because they make content constantly talking about YouTubers. They constantly talk about personalities. They constantly talk about Jimmy Dore, and they do great because of that. Guys, that is not my channel. I'm not here to talk. This is not the CJ era no more. I'm not here to talk about YouTube. I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm here to bring people on like John, great geopolitical analyst that you guys have seen for the past few weeks. So the people like Brent who've been programmed into always having that commentary about commentary. That's why you're like, why don't you call out Jimmy, Nick? Why don't you call out Jimmy? Because that's not what I fucking do. I want to talk about geopolitics, guys. If you want to follow a channel that focuses on drama, the Vanguard is right down the street, man. Like there's plenty of channels for that. You guys know what the disagreements we have are. So why should we obsess over that? You know what I mean? But that's my thought. I have to reply.
I'm with you on that.
That's my thought. Thank you for the super chat, Brent. I had to reply to it. So John, any last thoughts?
No, that's it. Thank you so much. Just want to thank you and your great audience.
Yeah, I appreciate you having you on. You brought a lot of great commentary.
Thank you
tonight as well. So thank you guys for watching Nick at Night. We have a post duopoly show with Due Dissonance, Harmless Media. One of my favorite shows to do. That's on Friday. So expect post duopoly this Friday. Thank everyone for watching the show. Make sure you guys follow John Pang on Twitter. It was great having him on. Have a great rest of your night, my friends. Take care.